my wife whispered at our anniversary dinner. "I'm leaving you for my boss." The restaurant noise didn't even dip. The sound of forks and laughter went on around us like nothing had happened. A candle flickered between us, short, tired, melting into a puddle of wax. I stared at her, at that calm, rehearsed face, and realized she'd been practicing that line all week in the bathroom mirror. Then she added, "He's buying me a $2 million house." That part she hadn't rehearsed. It slipped out like a flex, an upgrade over emotion, a reward for a job well done. She waited for me to react, to make a scene, to plead, to beg, maybe even flip the table so she could tell her friends later that I'd lost it. But I didn't. I smiled, pulled out my phone, opened the City Records app I use every day at work, tapped a few times, sent a message to a group chat labeled Civic Committee, Gala Planning. I typed, "Congrats to Adrian Vale on the new waterfront property. Big things coming." 2 minutes later, her phone lit up. It buzzed, then it buzzed again. She glanced down, face draining, answered. And I heard, even across the restaurant's hum, Adrian's voice screaming through her speaker. "Who the hell did you just tell?" She looked at me like she'd seen a ghost. I was just a guy with his salmon half-eaten and a bourbon sweating on the coaster. I said, "You should take that outside. Reception's better by the bar." When she left, people at nearby tables pretended not to stare. I sat back, finished the bourbon, and stared at the candle as it drowned itself. That was the night everything changed. That was the night I realized silence was my sharpest weapon. I didn't go after her, didn't chase her into the parking lot, didn't shout across the restaurant like some wounded animal. I just sat there, listening to the soft scrape of plates, the distant pop of a cork, the clatter of ice in a bartender's shaker. The world was still spinning, but for the first time in years, it felt like I'd stepped off the ride. The noise around me blurred into a low hum, like the sound inside a seashell. The candle between us flickered again, sputtering in its own wax. It looked exhausted, as if it too had been holding on longer than it should have. When I finally stood, I left a tip large enough to feel like an apology. To the waiter, not to her. He didn't deserve to absorb the awkward weight of the moment. She did. Outside, the night was colder than it should have been for late spring. I walked to my car slowly, savoring the feel of the air. Every step felt deliberate, like a punctuation mark. The parking lot was half empty, but her car was still there, parked crooked, her hazard lights blinking like nervous eyes. She was inside, phone pressed to her ear, the sharp light from the screen cutting across her face. I didn't need to guess who she was talking to. I could see it in her posture, the way her shoulders were tight, the way her mouth kept twitching, caught between apology and fear. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. I sat in my car, engine off, just watching. For years, I'd been the quiet one in the relationship, the steady background hum to her fireworks. She liked to talk, about people, about work, about what we should buy next, or where we should travel next, or how everyone else seemed to be doing better. I'd let her talk because that's what she wanted. But now, sitting there in the dark, I realized how much she'd mistaken quiet for weakness. She drove off eventually, tires squealing out of the lot. I stayed another 10 minutes before turning the key. I wasn't in a rush to go home. The house didn't feel like mine anymore. Maybe it never had. When I finally walked through the door, her perfume still hung in the hallway, light and floral, like the ghost of her passing through. The scent made me think of all the small lies she'd told, little nothings wrapped in sugar. Just working late? Just dinner with the team. You wouldn't enjoy it anyway. I'd believed them because belief was easier. But now, standing there, I could see every moment where the truth had been trying to surface. The next morning, I woke early. Habit more than necessity. The house was silent except for the refrigerator's low hum. I made coffee, black, strong enough to scrape the sleep out of my skull. The mug warmed my hands while my mind went to work on its own. I wasn't angry, not the way I thought I'd be. Anger was loud, messy. What I felt was clean, sharp, focused. At work, my colleagues noticed something different. They said I seemed calm. They thought it was the calm of a man who'd finally stopped fighting traffic in his head. They didn't know it was the calm of someone who'd just cut his anchor loose. Adrian Vale. That was the name she'd said. I knew the name, of course. Everyone in our department did. He was the kind of man who smiled like he was doing you a favor. Ran a contracting firm that somehow always won the city's biggest bids. He liked the spotlight, liked being the one shaking hands at the ribbon cuttings. The man had money, but he wanted more than that. He wanted to be admired. And admiration is a fragile thing. I didn't need to ruin him. I just needed to make sure he did it himself. City records are public, but the people who care about optics don't always act like they remember that. Adrian had recently acquired a waterfront lot, a tricky piece of property under environmental review. He wasn't supposed to buy it until the paperwork cleared, but someone must have whispered to him that it would go through soon. Someone like my wife. I didn't post anything more after that first message. I didn't have to. The message had legs. It traveled. Within an hour, a local journalist I'd met at a zoning conference messaged me. Did Vale really buy the harbor lot? I didn't confirm. I didn't deny. I just sent back a shrug emoji. By the end of the day, the inquiry had reached City Hall. The same hall where Vale had friends, but not the kind who'd risk their careers for him. The next morning, his name was on every department head's lips. By the afternoon, the mayor's assistant had scheduled a clarification meeting. I didn't go near it. I didn't even mention it. I just watched the dominoes tilt. That night, my wife came home. She looked smaller somehow, her confidence chipped. She stood in the doorway like a visitor. "I need to talk," she said. I gestured toward the couch, but didn't get up. "It's not what you think," she started. That was her favorite opener. He's under a lot of pressure right now. He thought someone leaked confidential information." "Someone did," I said. She blinked. "You?" I sipped my coffee, not answering. The silence stretched until it felt like a wall between us. "You don't understand," she said finally, her voice trembling in that performative way that used to win me over. "He was going to leave his wife. We were going to start something new." "Was," I repeated. She flinched like I'd slapped her. That night she slept in the guest room. I didn't hear her cry, but I imagined she did, softly into the pillow like someone rehearsing regret. The days that followed were quiet, deceptively so. She stopped going to work. I stopped asking why. Her phone stayed face down most of the time, screen lighting up and dimming in silence. Once, I caught her glancing toward the front door like she was expecting someone, but no one came. A week later, I heard from a colleague that Adrian had been put on temporary leave, pending an investigation into his property dealings. He'd been the city's golden boy. Now he was radioactive. Deals fell apart. Sponsors withdrew. His name turned toxic overnight. And just like that, my wife's big escape turned into a cage. She started cooking again, cleaning, doing the small things she hadn't done in years. She called it reconnecting. I called it pretending. Every night, I watched her eyes search mine for forgiveness that wasn't there. I gave her silence instead, and she filled it with nervous chatter. It was almost peaceful, watching her squirm in the emptiness she'd created. Sometimes I wondered if that made me cruel. Maybe it did, but cruelty isn't always noise. Sometimes it's the absence of response, the absence of rescue. The real satisfaction wasn't revenge. It was control. For years, she'd measured love in grand gestures, in jewelry and vacations, in posts that captured perfect moments. But the truth of love, or maybe the truth of people, is revealed in the quiet spaces, the pauses. And she'd never learned to live in those. 2 weeks later, she packed a bag. She didn't tell me where she was going, and I didn't ask. I watched her drag the suitcase down the hall, her heels clicking like punctuation. At the door, she turned. "Are you really just going to let me walk out?" she asked. "I already did," I said. She left the key on the counter. The door closed. The sound was soft, final. That night, I poured another bourbon, sat on the porch, and watched the city lights ripple across the water. The air smelled like rain and salt. Somewhere downtown, sirens wailed, fading into distance. I thought about Adrian, probably pacing in his office, shouting into phones that no longer answered. I thought about her, maybe in a hotel, scrolling through messages that never came. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt free. Days turned to weeks. Life found a rhythm again. Work was the same, meetings, permits, paperwork. But the silence after each day no longer felt heavy. I filled it with small things, the sound of coffee dripping, the rustle of newspapers, the soft creak of the chair on the porch. Then, one evening, a letter arrived. No return address, her handwriting on the envelope. Inside was a single page. "I don't expect forgiveness," she'd written. "I just wanted you to know that I see it now. The way you stayed calm, the way you let it all unfold. I thought silence was weakness. I was wrong. It's power. And it terrifies me." I folded the letter, slid it back into the envelope, and tucked it into a drawer. Not as a keepsake, just as a reminder. Because she was right. Silence is power. It's the one language people can't manipulate, the one sound that forces them to listen to themselves. Months later, the city held a charity gala. I attended as usual, part of the planning committee. The hall glittered with chandeliers and champagne laughter. And there he was, Adrian Vale, standing near the back, thinner, older, his once perfect smile brittle. He saw me. Our eyes met across the crowd. He didn't say a word. Neither did I. Later that night, as I left the building, I saw my reflection in the glass doors. I looked the same suit, same calm face. But something in the eyes had changed. Not hardness, just clarity. Silence had reshaped me. People talk about revenge like it's a moment, a single strike. But it's not. It's a quiet erosion, a slow redrawing of lines. It's watching someone fall into the pit they dug for themselves and never once raising your voice. In the months that followed, I rebuilt my life not by chasing new things, but by subtracting. I stopped explaining myself, stopped filling empty spaces with apologies. When people tried to pull me into their noise, I let them tire themselves out against my quiet. There's a strange peace in being underestimated. Silence makes people confess. It makes them show their cracks. Eventually, word reached me that she'd moved out of state, started over. Maybe she found someone new, maybe she didn't. I never looked her up. Some ghosts are better left unnamed. Sometimes I think back to that night. The candle, the restaurant hum, the way her voice trembled just slightly when she said the words. I can still feel the weight of that moment, but not with pain. More like memory etched in glass. If I could go back, would I change anything? Maybe I'd eat the salmon while it was still hot. Maybe I'd order a second bourbon instead of finishing the first. But everything else, the words, the silence, the smile, I'd do it all the same. Because in the end, I didn't lose anything that was truly mine. I gained something else entirely, the ability to watch chaos unfold without needing to be part of it. To understand that revenge doesn't always need a witness or a headline or applause. Sometimes it's just a man, a phone, and a single, well-timed message, and a silence so complete it could split the night in two. I still visit that restaurant sometimes, different table, different drink. The waiters don't recognize me, and that's fine. I sit near the window, watch the reflections of people coming and going, their laughter bouncing off the glass. Life continues its endless rhythm, unaware of the quiet revolutions happening in small corners of it. Every time the candle on my table burns low, I think about how it used to flicker between us, how its light revealed more truth than any confession ever could. That was the night everything changed. That was the night I realized silence wasn't just a weapon, that it was freedom. It was the sound of finally, quietly winning. My name is Evan Wyatt, 34, building inspector for the city. The job isn't glamorous, but it pays the mortgage and keeps me invisible, which is a great trait when you're about to start a quiet war. The day after that dinner, Lena moved into a rental for a week. She said she needed space. She left most of her things behind, except the jewelry and the laptop from her job at Brightside PR. That told me all I needed to know. She wasn't moving out. She was relocating to the next chapter, the one that came with marble countertops and ocean views. I watched the moving van from our porch camera feed. She didn't know I could access it remotely. I wasn't spying, not really. The camera was ours. The house was ours, for now. When the movers hoisted one of the boxes into the truck, the print on the side caught my eye. Marina Storage Unit 12A. Adrian Vale owned a yacht named Solaris. The coincidence made me laugh out loud. At work that morning, I filed a recusal memo. The waterfront redevelopment project Adrian's firm was handling had just crossed my desk for inspection. By logging a conflict of interest, I kept my hands clean but still had access to the public record. Legal, simple, smart, paper trails. That's where people like me live. You can't fight money with money, but you can drown it in paperwork. That night, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. Unknown. They're setting me up for the invoices. I have receipts. Me. Who is this? Unknown. Nadia, from Brightside. You don't know me, but I know what they're doing to you. She sent a screenshot of a Slack message. Lena and Adrian. My wife's name highlighted in bold. If Nadia asks questions, say it was her mistake. Keep the logs clean. I stared at it. Not out of shock, just appreciation. When people bury evidence, they forget how shallow digital graves are. As the story unfolds, hit the hype button, like, subscribe, and write in the comments. Would you forgive them or walk away? 2 days after Lena left, Adrian parked his silver coupe outside Brightside's garage, top down, shirt crisp like he thought the world was watching. I was watching. I waited until he went inside, then walked to his car, pretending to check my phone. My reflection looked tired, meaner than I remembered. I ran my finger along a scratch someone else had left on his door. Then I left a sticky note on his windshield. Your noise permit expired last week. Dockmaster will fine you $1,000 day. True statement. I checked the record myself. Didn't even have to fake it. That afternoon, my phone rang. An unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. Then I listened. It was Adrian, voice tight. You think you can mess with me, Wyatt? Don't forget, I can make a few calls about conflict of interest. I smiled. Please do, I said to no one. It's all in writing. By Friday, whispers spread through the PR scene. Someone leaked that Brightside's CEO was having an affair with an employee. The internet did what it does best. Commenters speculated. Memes were made. My dinner post had done its job. Lena texted me that night. You started this. You're ruining my life. I typed back, I'm not ruining anything. I'm auditing it. Saturday morning, I met Nadia at a coffee shop. She was younger than I expected. Sharp, nervous, holding a manila folder like it was a life raft. They told HR I falsified an invoice, she said, but I have the original. See the timestamp? Lena changed it after I uploaded. I flipped through the pages. Everything she said checked out. All public metadata, all traceable. You okay testifying to that? I asked. I don't want to sue, she said. I just want to work without being blamed for their mess. I'm not asking you to sue, I said. I just need the truth. She handed me a USB drive. Be careful, he's connected. I smiled. So am I, just not to the same people. Sunday night, Lena showed up at the house unannounced. I was in the garage, tuning my old motorcycle. She leaned against the doorframe, looking tired and angry, like someone who'd realized their safety net was fraying. Why are you doing this? She asked. Doing what? You know what. The leaks, the calls. Adrian's board is talking about suspending him. Sounds like an HR issue, I said. You should bring it up at your next meeting. She folded her arms. You think you're smart, don't you? I think I'm precise, I said. There's a difference. She stepped closer. I made a mistake, Evan, but you're turning this into something ugly. It already was, I said. You just didn't notice until it got on your shoes. She slapped me, hard, then turned and stormed off. I didn't follow. I just whispered to the empty air. Now we're even. That night, a storm rolled in off the bay. The rain hit the garage roof like 1,000 fingers tapping. I sat there in the half-light, looking at my hands. I wasn't angry. I was awake. There's a moment when a man stops trying to be the good guy and just decides to be the honest one. Honesty's dangerous when you've been lied to long enough. I opened my laptop, typed out a formal HR complaint to Brightside, referencing their non-fraternization policy, Section 7.3, attached public photos of Adrian and Lena at a company event, and logged it under my name. I didn't have to hide. I was a husband, filing a factual statement about a policy violation. Then I hit send. I didn't expect justice. I expected noise, and in this city, noise always draws attention. Monday evening. I parked near Brightside's building, same spot where Adrian liked to show off his convertible. The sky was the color of old bruises. He came out at 6 sharp, phone to his ear, voice loud enough to echo. Yeah, I'll handle it, he said. It's under control. When he saw me leaning against the column, his smile froze. What are you doing here, Wyatt? City inspection, I said. Your garage lights violate Code Section 204.3. They need to be motion activated, not constant. He rolled his eyes. You're stalking me now? Just doing my job. He stepped closer, too close. Stay out of my business. Hard to. You keep building it in my jurisdiction. He laughed, sharp and mean. You think this little crusade makes you a man? He shoved my shoulder. Reflex took over. One slap, open-handed, fast. The sound cracked against the concrete. He staggered back, eyes wide. Security guards turned, cameras blinked red. I lifted my hands. You saw that, right? He touched me first? They nodded. One guard said, You're good. We got it. I walked away slow. Every step echoed. Behind me, Adrian hissed something I couldn't hear, but the guards did. They stepped between us. That night, I filed a menacing report. No charges, just documentation, paper armor. By Tuesday morning, HR at Brightside had opened an internal investigation. Small ripples, but I could feel the current shifting. Lena stopped responding to texts. Adrian's board went quiet. Nadia messaged, They're panicking. HR's running around deleting old Slack channels. I stared at my phone for a long minute before typing a single reply. Keep copies. Timestamped. I didn't know if she would, but I had to believe she would understand what that meant. Don't just save screenshots, save metadata, log the deletions, archive everything. You only get one chance to preserve the trail before it's gone forever. That afternoon, my supervisor called me into his office. The blinds were drawn halfway, letting thin bars of gray light stripe across the stacks of files on his desk. His tone was oddly casual, conversational, the way someone sounds when they're trying not to alert a trapped animal. "Listen," he said, "the waterfront project. Adrian's pulled out. There's an opportunity to take it on if you want to withdraw your recusal." I shook my head before he'd even finished. "No," I said, sharper than I meant, then softer. "But I'll review the permit logs, just to make sure everything's in compliance." He hesitated. "You're sure?" "Positive," I said. "It's public work, open access. I can read everything without touching a thing." And I did. That evening, when the office emptied out and the hum of the HVAC became the only sound, I logged into the database. The permit logs were sprawling, thousands of entries, cross-referenced with parcel IDs, ownership records, contractor licenses. The waterfront zone was its own labyrinth, a tangle of historical easements, rezoning requests, and temporary variances granted under emergency ordinances. But I'd been doing this long enough to know how to read between the lines. At first, I thought maybe Adrian was just hiding under another shell company. He was too careful, too deliberate to leave things in his own name. I searched every entity he'd touched in the last 5 years. Rivershore Holdings, DAC Developments, Baylight Partners, even the newer one, Orange Street Ventures. Nothing. Not a single application for new residential construction anywhere near the waterfront. I ran the search again, widening the scope, pulling in the past 12 months of activity in adjacent parcels. Still nothing. The house he'd promised her, the $2 million build, with the glass atrium and the view over the bay, it didn't exist. Not on paper, not in reality. There was no permit, no contractor, no architect's stamp, no recorded survey. It was vapor. A story he'd spun, polished, and repeated until it hardened into something she could almost believe in. He'd lied to her, and she, Lena, had bet her marriage on that lie. I sat there in the flickering monitor light, feeling a cold, precise kind of anger settle into place. Not outrage, not shock, just the quiet confirmation of something I'd suspected for weeks. People like Adrian always assumed paperwork was invisible. They thought the real deals happened in back rooms, in texts, in dinners that didn't make the calendar. But the truth always leaves a trace, even if you have to squint to see it. I scrolled through the rest of the log, line by line, until my eyes blurred. Variances for stormwater runoff, soil assessments, title adjustments, nothing connected to him. The whole waterfront corridor was being reclassified for mixed use, but no residential permits had cleared. Whatever he'd told Lena about breaking ground in May, it was fiction. I could almost see her the night he told her, the way she'd probably smiled, relieved, thinking everything was finally going to make sense. I imagined him showing her renderings he'd downloaded from some developer's proposal, passing them off as his own. Maybe he'd said, "This is ours," tracing his finger over the glossy printed image of a house that didn't exist. And she'd believed him, because she needed to. The next morning, I came in early, before sunrise. The office smelled faintly of stale coffee and cleaning chemicals. I printed the relevant pages, parcel histories, permit searches, ownership filings, and slipped them into a folder. Not because I planned to use them, but because evidence has a way of disappearing once people realize what it means. By the time the rest of the staff arrived, I'd already filed a compliance note in the internal system. No active or pending residential applications associated with Adrian K. or affiliated entities. Simple, factual, unambiguous. It would sit there in the log forever, time-stamped, immutable. "Around 10, Nadia called. Her voice was a whisper. "They're trying to rewrite the internal comms policy," she said, "retroactively." "Of course they are," I said. "Should I keep pulling archives?" "Yes," I said. "Every channel, especially anything with budget codes or vendor mentions. They'll try to say it was all personal chatter, not official." She exhaled, shaky but determined. "Got it." After that, things moved fast. HR issued a memo about data hygiene. The shared drives started emptying out overnight. Access permissions shifted without explanation. A few junior analysts found their credentials revoked, pending review. I watched it all like a slow implosion, but by then, I already had what I needed. In the evenings, I started walking along the waterfront after work. The air was colder than usual for spring, sharp with salt and diesel. The crane stood motionless against the gray horizon, and the unfinished pilings jutted from the water like ribs. Somewhere out there, Adrian had promised Lena a house. Sunlight over the bay, imported stone, a private dock. He'd painted her a dream anchored to a place that would never hold it. I wondered if she knew yet. Sometimes I imagined her still waiting for him to show her blueprints, to say construction was delayed, to promise it would all be worth it. But she'd gone quiet after our last conversation. I'd sent one more message, something small, almost meaningless, and gotten nothing back. Her silence felt deliberate, like she'd folded herself out of the noise to survive it. Nadia kept feeding me updates in fragments. They're deleting messages from last month, or legal's drafting statements. Once, late at night, she sent me a screenshot, a snippet of a private thread between two execs. One line stood out. "We need to contain the narrative before it leaks to planning." Too late, I thought. The truth was already in the records. When the audit team came in, I stayed silent. I didn't volunteer anything, didn't hide anything either. I just answered what was asked, nothing more. It's remarkable how much damage simple honesty can do in a system built on pretense. Weeks passed. The panic that had rippled through the office began to fade, replaced by the slow, uneasy rhythm of damage control. HR issued new compliance training modules. Adrian's name disappeared from the project notes. Officially, the Waterfront initiative was being paused pending budget review. Unofficially, everyone knew it was over, and Lena, no one mentioned her anymore. But I thought of her often. I thought of the night we'd last spoken, her voice unsteady but clear as she'd said, "He told me it's all for us. That once it's built, everything will change." I'd wanted to tell her then that people like him don't build things. They consume them, but I didn't. I just listened, because sometimes the truth is crueler spoken too soon. Now, sitting alone in my apartment, I pulled up the folder again. The permit logs, the ownership filings, the empty applications, proof that nothing he'd promised her was real. It was a strange kind of solace, knowing that the world still kept records even when people lied. I leaned back, letting the quiet fill the room. That night, for the first time in a week, I slept well. But sleep, I learned, doesn't mean peace. It means your mind stops fighting long enough to let the pieces settle. When I woke, the city was shrouded in fog, the kind that blurs the edges of everything. I made coffee, sat by the window, and thought about how lies collapse. Not all at once, but in increments, like wood rotting beneath paint. A week later, a reporter called. I don't know how she got my number. "We're hearing rumors about irregularities in the waterfront permits," she said. "Anything you can confirm?" I told her the truth. No applications under his name or any of his companies, nothing on record. "Would you be willing to go on record?" she asked. "No," I said. "But you can cite public data. It's all there." She thanked me, and that was the last I heard from her. But 2 days later, an article appeared online. Waterfront Mirage, the project that never was. The story named no one, but everyone in our circles knew exactly who it was about. After that, Adrian vanished from the board completely. His profile scrubbed, his contact info redirected to communications. Someone said he'd left the country. Someone else said he was consulting independently. None of it mattered. Nadia texted, "You did this." "No," I replied. "He did." Still, I felt the weight of it. Justice, if that's what this was, never feels like victory. It just feels like the noise finally stops. In the evenings, I kept walking by the waterfront. The construction fencing rattled in the wind. The bay water churned against the pilings. There was something almost holy in the emptiness there, an unfinished promise returning to stillness. I thought about how easily we build illusions from language. Permit, proposal, partnership, home. Each word a thin wall erected to separate truth from what we want to believe. Adrian's genius wasn't in building. It was in naming things just convincingly enough that no one checked whether they were real. And Lena, she'd believed because she had to. Because love makes paperwork irrelevant. Because when someone looks you in the eye and swears they're building something for you, you don't ask to see the blueprints. You just imagine standing in the sunlight of a house that hasn't been built yet. Months passed. The audit concluded quietly, without headlines. Official statements framed it as administrative discrepancies. No one went to jail. No one ever does. But I kept my folder. Not for revenge, just to remember that once, the truth had weight. Sometimes, late at night, I'd open the documents again, not to read them, but to see the timestamps. Each one a record of a moment when the lie still held. The gap between those times and now felt vast, like a distance measured not in days, but in disillusionment. One evening I ran into Nadia outside a cafe. She looked exhausted, but lighter somehow. "They moved me to another department," she said. "Different team, different city." "Good," I said. "You deserve that." She smiled faintly. "Do you ever think about Lena?" all the time. She didn't deserve any of it. No, I said. But she'll survive it. People like her always do. We stood there a while, not saying much. The world had moved on, as it always does. The headlines faded, the rumors cooled, and new projects took their place. But underneath it all, something fundamental had shifted. Trust, once broken, doesn't mend. It calcifies into vigilance. I kept working, quietly, methodically. Each new file I reviewed, each approval I stamped, I felt the echo of that old story behind it, the reminder that systems only work when someone cares enough to look. Most people don't. Most people assume the paperwork means what it says. But I had seen how easy it was to fabricate meaning, to bend the truth into shapes that fit the narrative. And I'd seen what it costs when someone believes too deeply in those shapes. One night, months later, a letter arrived at my apartment. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting immediately. Lena. Inside was a single page. I know you were right, it said. I saw the records. Thank you for not telling me then. I needed to see it myself. I've left him. I'm starting over. Don't worry about me. I'm okay. I sat with that letter for a long time, tracing the faint indentation of her pen on the paper. There was something in her words. Resignation, yes, but also strength. The kind that comes after the collapse, when you realize you're still standing in the dust. I didn't reply. Some messages don't need answers. After that, I slept better. Not because everything was fixed, but because the truth had finally found its place. Every now and then, I still walk by the waterfront. The pilings are still there, but now they're covered in moss. The project site has been fenced off, reclaimed by time and salt. The wind off the bay carries the smell of rust and seaweed, and the light hits the water in fractured silver patterns. I stand there sometimes, thinking of what could have been, a house that never was, a promise that dissolved before it was even written down. But I also think of the small victories, the time-stamped logs, the copies Nadia saved, the letter that said, I'm okay. Maybe that's enough. Maybe the point was never to build the house, but to dismantle the illusion of it, to remind ourselves that truth, however fragile, still exists in the record. So I keep the folder, not on a computer, not in the cloud, but printed, paper that can't be quietly rewritten. When I flip through it, the pages whisper softly, like the tide against the shore. And sometimes, in that whisper, I hear Lena's voice again. Not angry, not broken, just steady. Keep copies, she might say, time-stamped. And I do. Always. Because memory fades, but paper doesn't. Because stories like theirs, and ours, only disappear when we let them. Because somewhere out there, another promise is being made, another illusion constructed, another person believing, and when it all falls apart, someone will need to read the logs, to see the spaces where the truth should have been. The city keeps building. Cranes rise, steel frames climb into the fog. New developers, new names, new stories. But every time I see a glossy rendering of some waterfront estate, I look for the permit number at the bottom. If it's missing, I smile, just slightly. Some habits die hard. At night, I return to my apartment, the same hum of distant traffic beneath the window, the same faint salt smell drifting in from the bay. I set the folder back on the shelf, next to the old reports, the ones from before everything fell apart. The edges are soft now from handling. I sit down, pour a drink, and think of all the unseen hands that hold the world together. The clerks, the archivists, the ones who double-check the signatures, the quiet custodians of reality. We don't build monuments, we build records. And in the end, that's what remains. That night, as I turn off the light, I feel the weight of the city settle outside my window, a living thing, restless, full of half-finished stories. Somewhere out there, someone is lying. Somewhere else, someone is believing. And somewhere, maybe, another person like me is keeping copies. For the first time in months, I don't feel tired, just calm. The kind of calm that comes when you understand your role in the story. Not the hero, not the villain. Just the witness. The one who reads the records, who keeps them safe. And when sleep finally comes, it's deep and undisturbed, like water closing over something that was never meant to surface again. Thursday. The rumor blogs finally caught fire. Brightside CEO suspended amid workplace allegations. Adrian's photo, half-shadowed, Lena blurred behind him. Comments piled up like wet leaves. At 8 a.m., my phone buzzed. Lena again. Are you proud of yourself? She said. Not yet, I said. You'd know when I was. You've destroyed everything. No, I said, staring at the ceiling. You sold it. I just posted the receipt. That evening, I met Nadia again. She handed me printed emails, timestamps, forwarding headers, all legal, all traceable. They're blaming me for the leak, she said. But I didn't talk to anyone. You didn't have to, I said. Truth has its own legs. She smiled, faint but real. You're not what I expected. I get that a lot. By Saturday, I'd earned a new nickname at City Hall, the Quiet Storm. Someone said Adrian was trying to get me fired for conflict of interest. My boss laughed. Evan filed recusal before anything hit the fan. Smart man. I didn't gloat. I just marked another date in my notebook. Sunday morning, the Civic Forum held its open session about waterfront zoning. Adrian showed up in a dark suit and fake smile, trying to project control. Lena sat in the back, sunglasses hiding the panic. When a local journalist asked about Brightside's conflict of interest, Adrian snapped. Those claims are baseless, he said. Certain disgruntled individuals are spreading lies. That was my cue. I raised my hand. Question for Mr. Vale. As a city employee, I have to verify permits. Can you clarify why the property at Marina Lot 14 has no building application under your name? He froze. Cameras clicked, so reporters turned. After 5 seconds too long, he said, We're still in planning phase. Interesting, I said. Your PR campaign already announced it as under construction. Seems misleading. Gasps. A few chuckles. Lena's shoulders sank. Adrian stammered. The moderator called for a break. By the time the forum ended, his reputation was bleeding out in public. That night, I stood on my porch, beer in hand, watching the bay lights flicker. My phone buzzed. A new message. Unknown number again. You got what you wanted. Stop before you ruin us all. It wasn't Lena. It wasn't Adrian. The signature read, Mara Vale. Mara Vale called me the next morning. Her voice was calm, deliberate, like someone who reads every word before saying it aloud. Mr. Wyatt, she said, I believe you and I want the same thing. I doubt it, I said. You still share a last name with the man I'd like to see unemployed. That may not be true for much longer. She asked to meet in a public place, daylight, cameras. I picked the City Botanical Garden Cafe, neutral ground. She arrived in a beige coat and sunglasses, no entourage. She didn't order coffee, just sat, hands folded. I don't want him arrested, she said. I want him out, quietly, no scandal that touches my kids or my company stock. Then why call me? Because you're the only person he's actually afraid of right now. She slid a small envelope across the table. Inside were copies of public filings, yacht registration dates, property tax lapses, screenshots of social media posts showing Adrian and Lena at company events. Nothing stolen, nothing illegal, but organized perfectly. You've been keeping records, I said. I learned to before he learned to lie, she said. Use them how you want. Just don't call me again. She stood up, left, disappeared into the noon crowd like she'd never existed. I sat there a long time, reading the papers, realizing the most dangerous person in this mess wasn't Adrian or Lena. It was his wife, and she'd just given me ammunition with serial numbers. The cafe noise faded as I thumbed through the stack again. Each page was neat, printed on standard letter paper, but the precision was surgical. Dates aligned, names cross-referenced, transactions highlighted in faint yellow. Someone had spent hours, maybe months, assembling a story in numbers and signatures. I wasn't sure yet what the story said, but it had weight. It hummed with intent. A breeze carried the smell of wet soil from the gardens. People walked past with paper cups and polite laughter, but the world felt sharpened, fragile. Mara Vale had moved through it like a ghost. Invisible but deliberate, leaving behind a trail of paper that could ruin her husband. I'd seen revenge before, usually loud, messy, fueled by anger. Hers was methodical, measured, the kind of revenge that looked like accounting until it was too late. I folded the papers back into the envelope, slipped it into my coat pocket, and watched a family feed pigeons near the fountain. The father, tall, distracted, scrolled through his phone. The mother laughed with the children, tossing crumbs. I wondered what Mara's family looked like when they were still pretending to be whole. Did Adrian ever stand beside her in moments like this, nodding for a photograph while calculating his next lie? I called her number once after she left, just to see. It rang twice, then went to a voicemail that was no longer in service. Efficient, final. She hadn't just given me the evidence. She'd erased the trail. I respected that. Back at my office, the light was dim, filtered through half-closed blinds. My desk was a chaos of case files and stale coffee cups. The kind of room that said a man worked there only because he couldn't stand still. I cleared a space and spread the papers out in a rough grid. Property records in one corner, maritime filings in another, social media captures along the edge. A pattern began to form, faint but visible, the way a constellation appears once you know which stars to connect. Adrian Vale, CEO, charmer, or serial opportunist. The kind of man who smiled like he owned your time the moment you met him. I'd crossed him before, during an audit that had gone sideways. He'd buried evidence faster than I could dig it up, but not without casualties. People lost jobs, reputations, savings. I hadn't forgotten. Apparently neither had his wife. The first document was a yacht registration. The vessel's name, the Lena. Tasteful, understated, and painfully obvious. Registered under a holding company in Belize, but the payments, insurance, mooring fees, were tied to a domestic account under Vale Investments. That alone wasn't criminal, but it reeked of arrogance. Then came the property records. A vacation house in Santa Rosa, left off corporate disclosures but maintained by the same staff listed on company payroll. That was interesting. The screenshots told a more personal story. Adrian and Lena, his executive assistant, the one he claimed was like family. At charity galas, private dinners, even a weekend sailing trip under the guise of a strategic retreat. The captions were harmless. The smiles weren't. Each image was time-stamped, cross-referenced with travel receipts. If this were a chessboard, Mara had mapped every move in advance. By midnight, I'd built a timeline stretching back 3 years. The affair wasn't new, nor was the financial sleight of hand. Adrian had used company resources to fund his personal life, careful enough to hide behind shell corporations, but sloppy in the details. A man like him always believed rules applied to others. I leaned back in my chair, rubbing the tension from my eyes. The office clock ticked with the soft patience of a predator. I wondered if Mara knew how much power she'd just handed me, or if she'd already calculated the odds. Maybe this was her way of absolving herself. Maybe she'd already packed a bag, arranged new bank accounts, new names. Women like her didn't act without an exit strategy. The next day, I visited the yacht club listed in the registration. A white-painted pier stretched into the harbor, yachts gleaming like teeth. The receptionist recognized the name instantly. Mr. Vale? He keeps the Lena in berth 12. Haven't seen him this week, though. Usually comes by Fridays. Does he come alone? I asked. She smiled, the polite kind of smile that pretends not to know more than it does. He has guests sometimes. Berth 12 sat near the end of the dock. The yacht was pristine, too pristine for someone who spent most of his time in boardrooms. I walked past slowly, pretending to check my phone, and caught a glimpse of the interior through the tinted glass. Champagne flutes, a silk scarf draped over the helm chair, an unopened bottle of rum. The maintenance crew eyed me curiously. One of them, a man in his 60s with oil-stained hands, called out, "You looking for Mr. Vale? He's a piece of work." I paused. "That right?" The man chuckled, wiping his hands. "Always showing off, never tipping. You can tell the type. Brings his lady friends around, acts like the ocean belongs to him." "Lady friends," I repeated. He nodded. There was one. Lena, I think. Blonde. Wore sunglasses at night. Thought she was invisible. I thanked him and left before curiosity became suspicion. The harbor wind was sharp, carrying salt and diesel. My coat flapped as I walked back toward the parking lot, the envelope burning a hole in my pocket. That night, I started writing. Notes, hypotheses, connections. I wasn't sure yet whether I was building a case or a confession. Mara's words echoed in my head. I don't want him arrested. I want him out. That meant careful. That meant no headlines, no police, just a quiet dismantling of Adrian Vale's kingdom. To do that, I needed leverage, the kind that forced resignation without resistance. The yacht records were a start. The undeclared property was better. But the real weapon would be fear, the suggestion of exposure without the act itself. If I could make Adrian believe the walls were closing in, he'd run before they even touched him. I spent the next week tracing the money. Shell companies, consultancy fees, fake invoices. The deeper I went, the clearer it became that Adrian had built an empire on smoke. Investors thought they were buying innovation, they were funding indulgence. The Santa Rosa property, for instance, had been renovated under a subsidiary listed as Strategic R&D. The yacht maintenance was filed under Client Entertainment. It was clever, if you ignored the ethics. One night, around 2 a.m., I found something that made me sit up straight. A transfer, $500,000, from a dormant research account to a personal trust belonging to Lena Dorson. The memo line read simply, "Retention bonus," dated 6 weeks before Adrian's last board presentation. That was the thread I needed. The next morning, I called a friend at the Securities Bureau, someone who owed me favors. I didn't give names, just patterns. Hypothetical scenarios, I said. He laughed, said hypotheticals like that could make headlines. Then his tone shifted. Wyatt, if someone's running this kind of side game, they're not just greedy, they're desperate. He was right. Desperation left fingerprints. I found more in the weeks that followed. Forged signatures, overlapping contracts, consulting firms that didn't exist. Each discovery tightened the noose, not just around Adrian, but around anyone complicit, including Lena. I drafted a letter. Anonymous, typed, sterile. It outlined enough discrepancies to raise alarm without naming sources. I mailed copies to 2 board members and 1 journalist known for corporate exposés. I knew the journalist wouldn't publish without proof, but rumor travels faster than ink. Within days, whispers began circulating through the company. Adrian's schedule grew erratic. Meetings postponed, calls unanswered. Then on a gray Thursday morning, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. Wyatt, a voice said, sharp with fatigue. Adrian, we need to talk. I was starting to think you'd forgotten how, I said. I don't know what game you think you're playing, but it ends now. You hear me? I don't play games, I said. I just keep score. There was a pause, then a hiss of breath. You think you can scare me? No, I said. But she can. Silence. A long, weighted silence. When he finally spoke again, his voice was lower, careful. You've talked to Mara. She talked to me, I said. And she's better at this than either of us. He hung up. I smiled, though it didn't feel like victory. It felt like inevitability. The next few days moved fast. Adrian canceled public appearances. The board announced a temporary leave of absence. Lena scrubbed her social media accounts. The yacht disappeared from its berth, supposedly moved for maintenance. It didn't matter. The damage was already done. Mara kept her word. She didn't call again. But every so often, I caught a glimpse of her name in the business pages, usually attached to quiet restructurings, acquisitions, charitable endowments. She was cleaning house, erasing him from the records 1 line at a time. Months passed. I tried to forget about the envelope, but it remained in my drawer, wrapped in a plain folder marked Garden Cafe. I'd look at it sometimes when the nights grew long and the cases dull, wondering if I'd done the right thing. Maybe Adrian deserved worse. Maybe he'd gotten exactly what he'd earned. One evening, I received a letter with no return address. Inside, a single sheet of paper, printed neatly, like before. You did what needed to be done. He's gone. Don't look for me. No signature, but it didn't need one. I leaned back, the city lights flickering through the blinds. Somewhere out there, Mara Vale was starting over, the kind of clean slate most people never get. And somewhere else, Adrian was probably plotting a comeback, smaller, meaner, but still dangerous. People like him didn't vanish. They mutated. Still, the world felt quieter. For now, that was enough. Weeks turned into months. New clients, new betrayals, the same old rhythm of lies and half-truths. Yet every time I passed the Botanical Garden Cafe, I slowed down, half expecting to see her there again. Beige coat, dark glasses, the faintest hint of a smile that said she'd already decided how the story would end. Once, I did stop, sat at the same table, ordered black coffee, watched the crowd move by. The garden had changed with the season, new blooms, brighter light, but the air carried the same weight of unspoken deals. I imagined her voice again, calm and deliberate. Use them how you want, just don't call me again. I wondered what became of her children, whether they knew the quiet war their mother had fought for their future, whether they'd remember her as the woman who saved them from scandal or the one who dismantled their father's empire with a folder of receipts. Sometimes justice isn't a gavel. Sometimes it's a whisper across a table, a beige coat in the noon sun, an envelope sliding into the hands of someone willing to act. I still have that envelope. The papers are fading now, the ink bleeding slightly from humidity. I could burn them, but I don't. They remind me of what precision can do when guided by purpose, of how the most dangerous weapon isn't rage, it's restraint. And Mara Vale, quiet, deliberate, unreadable, remains the only person who ever frightened me without raising her voice. She had learned to keep records before he learned to lie, and in the end, that was all it took. But stories like this don't end cleanly. A few months later, I received another call, blocked number again. I answered out of habit. Mr. Wyatt, a woman said. Not Mara, younger, nervous. You don't know me, but I think you used to work with my mother. Who's your mother? I asked. Mara Vale. The air went still. What's this about? She's missing, the girl said. It's been 2 weeks. They said there's no sign of foul play, but she left a note, with your name on it. The line went quiet, except for breathing, hers quick, mine slower, measured. Where are you? I asked. Her office, she said. There's another envelope. It says to give it only to you. I hesitated, then said, Stay there. I'm on my way. By the time I arrived, the building was nearly empty. Glass walls, quiet corridors, the kind of place built to look transparent but hide everything important. The daughter, late 20s, sharp eyes that mirrored her mother's, was waiting near the reception desk. She handed me the envelope without a word. It was smaller than the first, but heavier. Inside, a USB drive, a few handwritten pages, and a single photograph. Mara, standing at a pier, wind in her hair, looking not at the camera but past it, into something unseen. The note was short. If this reaches you, it means I've finished what I started. Don't look for me. You'll understand soon. The USB contained documents, dozens of them. Correspondence between Adrian and offshore banks, communications with investors, hidden accounts under new names. It wasn't just cleanup, it was confession. She'd continued her work long after I thought it was over, gathering proof not just to ruin Adrian, but to erase every trace of what he'd done. But one thing stood out. A final transfer from an account in her own name to a foundation overseas. The recipient field simply read, for them. I assumed she meant her children. I turned to her daughter. She didn't disappear, I said quietly. She walked away. The girl looked at me like she wanted to believe it. Maybe she did. Maybe that's what Mara wanted. To vanish before the world could define her by what she'd done. I left the building with the envelope under my arm, the night air cold and sharp. Somewhere in the city, life went on. People laughed, lights flickered, secrets traded hands. I thought of Mara, her calm voice, her folded hands, the way she'd said quietly as if it were the only word that mattered. Maybe she was gone. Maybe she was free. Maybe those are the same thing. And I, as always, was left holding the evidence. Proof that the most dangerous truths are the ones no one dares to speak aloud. The Garden Cafe closed years later, replaced by a boutique and a juice bar. I stopped by once during construction. The air smelled of sawdust and new paint, but if you listened closely, you could almost hear the faint echo of her voice, calm, deliberate, leaving no room for argument. Sometimes I think she's still out there, somewhere warm, near an ocean she doesn't own but finally belongs to, watching the horizon, unafraid of what might follow, and I like to think she keeps no more records now. She doesn't need to. The story's already written. I never called her again. But every time the phone rings and I hear silence on the other end, for a moment I almost expect it to be her. And every time, I almost wish it were. Brightside froze Adrian's accounts that week. The board suspended him, pending review of conduct. Lena's emails to him bounced. She called me that night, voice hoarse. You win, okay? You happy? I'm not in it for points, I said. I just like balance. You've ruined me. Not yet, I said. But you're getting there. She hung up. 5 minutes later, she sent a voice memo. Muffled sobs, then silence. I didn't answer. You can't fix a fire by hugging the flames. Monday morning, Nadia texted, They fired me, said I breached confidentiality. I met her at a diner near City Hall. She looked defeated, eyes red. I handed her a folder with a printout of the HR policy she'd sent me earlier. Section 4.2, I said. You reported misconduct internally. That's protected activity. They retaliated. Illegal. I can't afford a lawyer. You won't need to if you play it right, I said. File a rebuttal through email. CC every manager. Use calm language, short sentences, no accusations, just cite facts. She smiled weakly. You sound like you've done this before. I write building code citations, I said. Same structure. Keep it boring and lethal. Tuesday evening, Lena messaged, Please meet. I want to talk. No police, no shouting. I'm sorry, she said. I just need closure. I opened my mouth to answer, and a camera flash popped behind me. I turned. 2 guys with a telephoto lens ducked behind a trash bin. I laughed. Really? Lena's face went pale. No, I didn't. Save it. I lifted my phone, tapped twice. The screen showed recording, live to cloud. You might want to wave, I said. You're on a shared stream. The photographers froze. Then a voice echoed down the alley. Police? Hands visible? Detective Avery stepped out from his unmarked car, badge flashing. He looked at me, then at her. Evening? Everything all right? Better than expected, I said. He asked the photographers for IDs, took their info, and let them go. When he was done, he leaned toward me. Mr. Wyatt, I hope you're not planning to press charges. It'll just make things worse for her. No charges, I said. Just documentation. He nodded. You're consistent. I respect that. As Lena left, soaked and shaking, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. The next day, I walked the boardwalk to clear my head. The sea was restless, gulls arguing over fries. That's when I saw Adrian up ahead, phone glued to his ear, pacing like a wolf in too small territory. I turned to leave, but he spotted me. You think this is over? He shouted. I think it's public, I said. He lunged. I dodged. The phone flew from his hand, skidding under a pretzel cart. He dove after it, yelling. I stepped back, palms out, witnesses everywhere. When he finally found it, a lifeguard blew a whistle. Break it up, she yelled. Adrian glared at me, soaked in sweat. You'll regret this. I already have, I said, but you'll regret it longer. He left, shoulders hunched, phone cracked. By that evening, another blog posted photos of him from that scene. Headline: Disgraced PR exec loses temper on public boardwalk. The internet loves symmetry. Over the next 48 hours, I watched everything unravel. Brightside's investors pulled funding, clients froze contracts. My phone buzzed constantly with gossip, screenshots, news links. I didn't answer any of them. Revenge isn't about boasting, it's about silence. Late Thursday, my supervisor stopped by my cubicle. Heard you made headlines, he said. You good? I'm fine, I said. Just weather. He nodded. You've got a clean file, Evan. Keep it that way. I intend to. When he left, I stared at my monitor. The words on the zoning spreadsheet blurred into nothing. My reflection in the glass looked older, harder. Maybe that's what honesty does. Friday evening. The marina again. I parked near Slip 7, where Solaris slept under a blue tarp. The wind smelled of fuel and salt. My phone rang. Number blocked. I answered. You're pushing him too far, Mara's voice said. He's unraveling. Then maybe he'll finally see himself. He's capable of stupid things when cornered. So am I said. She sighed. You've made your point. Stop before it turns into something that stains us all. I didn't start this, I said, but I'm going to finish it. Silence. Then she said, if you're going to do it clean. I looked at the dark water and felt something shift inside me. The part that cared about redemption was gone. All that was left was math. Debits, credits, balance. Saturday morning smelled like rain and coffee and trouble. I stood in my kitchen staring at the backsplash she'd chosen. That marble pattern she said was timeless. I finally understood the word meant soulless. I opened the porch door. The bay was gray and churning. Storm coming again. Perfect. Nadia called. They called me back in, she said. New HR lead wants a meeting. Think it's a trap? Bring a friend, I said. Record everything. Calm tone, no emotion. I don't want to make this worse. It's already worse. Now you just document it. That afternoon, I drove by Brightside. A moving truck idled at the loading dock. Someone was clearing Adrian's office. Boxes labeled personal effects. A janitor told me. They said he's on indefinite leave. I thanked him, slipped him a $5 for the gossip, and drove off smiling. That night the wind came in heavy, pushing waves against the docks. I rented Slip 8 for one night under my name. Legal, paper trail, cashless. I backed my old motorcycle down the ramp and parked beside Solaris. At 2 a.m., I heard footsteps. Adrian, alone, muttering. He started the boat's generator, the low growl echoing off the pilings. I stepped out of the shadows. Evening. He spun. You've been following me? Just inspecting. You're out of compliance again. He laughed, manic. You think any of this matters now? I'm done. You finally said something true, I said. He lunged halfway, then stopped. The dock lights flickered in the wind. I kicked the rubber fenders between our slips. The boats thumped together, loud as thunder. Lights came on in nearby cabins. Shut up, he shouted. I'm just testing the structure, I said. Public safety. He stepped closer, fists tight. I pointed behind him. Security camera. Smile. He froze, looked up, red light blinking. Then I walked to the parking lot, dragged a key across the hood of his coupe in one long, slow line. The metal screamed. He shouted, You're insane. Maybe, I said. But your car's leased to the LLC registered in Lena's name. Enjoy the invoice. He started toward me. I raised my hands, palms open. Touch me, and you're on record again. He stopped, chest heaving. You're finished. Probably, I said. But you're first. The harbor police arrived minutes later from a noise complaint. Detective Avery stepped out of the patrol boat, same calm eyes. Gentlemen, he said. Everything all right? Adrian pointed. He vandalized my property. Avery checked his notepad. That car isn't under your name, Mr. Vale. Want to file anyway? Adrian's mouth opened, then closed. Avery turned to me. You heading home, Mr. Wyatt? Yeah, do that. I left the dock with the wind behind me. Sunday morning headlines hit like fireworks. Brightside CEO suspended. Internal review confirms policy violations. Stockholders demanded statements. HR leaked that 2 employees were on leave. Lena's social accounts vanished overnight. The gossip blogs filled the gap. Around noon, I got an email. Notice of property damage charge. Executive Rentals, LLC. Lena copied. The amount, $4,972. The line item read, vehicle restoration. I laughed so hard I spilled my coffee. At 3 p.m., a black SUV pulled up in front of my house. Mara Vale stepped out. No sunglasses this time. She looked lighter. He signed everything, she said. Custody, settlement, clean exit. He doesn't even know I had my own lawyer. Congratulations, I said. She studied me. You're not celebrating. I'm not done. You should be, she said quietly. You won. I shook my head. Winning's when they understand why they lost, she sighed. Then finish it fast. Monday evening, the museum's annual charity gala. Same committee I'd volunteered for months ago. My badge still worked. The place glowed gold and glass. Reporters mingled with city officials. And there they were, Adrian and Lena trying to look untouchable, his suit too sharp, her dress too tight, both pretending nothing burned behind them. I stayed near the service corridor watching. Nadia was there too, reinstated. She caught my eye, nodded once. At 9 p.m., the MC took the stage. Before we begin, he said, a few acknowledgments to our community partners. I slipped him an envelope earlier, labeled Updated Remarks. He read from it without checking. We'd also like to thank our volunteers for upholding standards of integrity during recent reviews of waterfront development. Cameras flashed. Adrian's smile cracked. Lena looked like she might faint. Then a sprinkler system triggered. Some caterer bumped a valve in the kitchen. Water sprayed from the ceiling. Chaos. People shouted, laughing, covering drinks. Adrian turned on me. You planned this. I raised both hands. Blame the plumbing. He lunged. I sidestepped. He slammed into the museum signage, a glass panel with Brightside PR sponsors transparency written across it. The panel shattered. Security grabbed him, holding him back. Reporters swarmed. The scene froze in flashes of white light. I leaned close enough for him to hear. You wanted headlines. Now you've got one. Across the hall, Lena stood soaked, mascara streaking, her phone buzzing with notifications she couldn't stop. The museum guard handed her a printed letter. Immediate termination of Brightside's sponsorship due to conduct. I turned to go. Outside, the rain met the sprinklers' leftover mist, turning the street into silver haze. Nadia caught up to me under the awning. It's over, she said. Almost, I said. She studied my face. You don't even look happy. Happy's for people who think life's fair. What will you do now? Sleep, I said. Maybe paint the kitchen. Behind us, sirens wailed. I looked back once. Adrian shouting at officers, soaked and furious. Lena beside him, shivering, mascara running down her cheeks like melted ink. I walked to my truck, started the engine, and let the wipers clear the view. Before driving off, I said it out loud, to no one but the rain. Balance restored. The radio crackled with static that faded into an old rock song. For the first time in months, I felt nothing. Not victory, not guilt, just quiet. And quiet felt perfect.